Okay, we're back for Devotions with Daniella. We are literally in my bedroom because it's summer and it's the only quiet place I can find in my house. So there we are. Where's the knitting? There's the knitting. First today, we're going to talk about people's tones and the tone of criticism, because this is a big one for people. So I got this message on a video that I make that it says, I agree, and you have some great points, but the message was lost on me because the criticism wasn't constructive. I love this one. I'm Daniella, scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. And this is one of those things that we see when people don't want to listen to critiques against their beloved groups or their beloved leaders or their beloved influencers with whom they have a parasocial relationship. So what happened was I read an article that was critiquing Amanda Montell's book, Cultish. The article is by B. Schofield, who does a lot of undercover reporting on cults. And if you're on TikTok, if you follow the comment on this video, you can see that original video. Basically, I love Cultish, okay? Cultish is a book that looks at the way cults use language and then looks at the way other organizations that we don't call cults use language in cult-like ways. Phenomenal. In fact, the book that I'm writing, The Culting of America, is doing that, but language is only one chapter, right? We are looking at cult behavior and then the way other organizations that are not cults use that behavior, okay? Wonderful. There's one problem with the book Cultish, is that she platforms a cult apologist view that brainwashing is not real. This is a long thing with a long history. This was called the Cult Wars in the late 70s and 80s, when religious scholars and religious leaders started worrying that all of the focus on cults was going to lead to legislation for freedom of religion. Japan did some of this, by the way, after their waltz with cults. And they didn't want that because they didn't want to lose any of their power. So religious leaders and religious scholars started all of this stuff saying, don't say the word cult. We're going to call it new religious movements. The man that invented that term took $100,000 from the Children of God pedophile cult to not call them a cult. And some of the people she quotes are survivors of the siblings who helped plan and execute the mass murder in Jonestown. So they have a very good reason to want to say that brainwashing doesn't exist. Okay, but this narrative is harmful, and this narrative has actively harmed me in my childhood and other children cults. It's very important. So even though I love Amanda Montell and I love all of her books, it is still an important criticism. And as a cult scholar and as a cult survivor, I cannot talk about or recommend that book without this caveat. It's also problematic because while she didn't intend to write a cult book, she intended to write a language book. She has written basically the most popular cult book out there. And so this needs to be addressed. So I made a TikTok. I wasn't angry. I was just like this. And then I was reading an article. And this man takes me to task for many, many paragraphs here. I hope you read her other stuff. I hope you're not just judging her. I hope you're all of this. And I went back and forth with him in good faith. And at the end, he says, well, I agree with everything you say, but because you didn't say it in a nice tone, your criticism is lost on me. And I tell you all, I get this when I am talking about grape culture in the military. I wanted to be an ally, but your tone turned me off. And what they're saying in parentheses there is, I'm going to choose the grapists because I don't like your angry tone, you little lady. How dare you? So this is one of the signs, and I'll try to remember to put my Guru Gotcha checklist on this video, probably won't, but this is why I created the Guru Gotcha checklist. This is exactly one of the signs to look out for, is when someone offers a valid critique. I'm in this field. I have more information than her. I have a resource. It is a valid critique. And you immediately feel hostile toward that person. You need to take a look at your relationship between you and that creator, because they don't know you. They are not your friend. And this is how people get drawn down into following toxic creators like Teal Swan, like the holistic psychologist, like many others out there that we can name. Doing a whole chapter on the influencer stuff in my book, The Culting of America. Right? And this is just one of those signs. Many of you have read my book, watched my channel, love me to death, and I love you back. 2 years from now, you hear that I did something wrong or bad or ridiculous out loud in public. I don't want you to be like, no way, she could never do that, right? Because she helped me in the past. Like, no, that's just not the thing. Frankly, the issue is that this woman wrote a book and did not research her topic enough, and she made a giant mistake. She wrote a cult book without knowing about the cult wars, which means you have not researched your topic enough. And if you put yourself out there as an expert on a topic by creating a book on that topic, then you are responsible for the contents of that book and whatever that book means to people when it is out in the world. So this wasn't actually about that book. That book is its own thing, but this is about the tone thing, right? People say this to me all the time, whether I'm talking about deconstructing white supremacy, deconstructing sexism, going after the chiarchy as a whole, which is all the isms, by the way, all of the chirisms, like, and you don't like my tone. So you're choosing white supremacy, racism, grape culture, and all of these other things. That's what you're saying to me because you don't like my tone. You're choosing the cult narrative that has harmed hundreds of thousands of people because you don't like my tone and you liked her book. It was an interesting thing that he could admit this, and that's what I said to him in return. But I don't think he realizes the red flag here, and I just want to use this as an example. And I don't think Amanda Montell will watch this, even though I'm sure she does know who I am. Nothing against her. I love her. I love her channel. I love her podcast. I love all of her books. Nothing is above critique. Looking so hard at AA when I say that. So I got this message on a video that I made that it says, I agree. And turn that down. Oh, we're not going to forget to put the Guru Gotcha checklist. Watch this magic. Actually going to remember. Where did the Guru Gotcha checklist? What? This is not good. There it is. Whew. I need to upload these onto my Patreon sometime soon. All of my cult lists. I need to take advantage that I have an artist in my house right now that is better than me. All right, Guru Gotcha checklist, captions, and then we download it before we post it so that we don't have a TikTok watermark so that all the other sites don't get mad at us. Oh, Musk stands. I don't like that. It's like the pro-natalists, these people that think that they are going to repopulate the world by having lots of children. And they're fine because they're not religious. They're just scientists. And it is so eugenicsy. And there was an article that was just published in The Guardian that is like 100% cult. And definitely Elon Musk is their like savior, their key person. It's so gross and creepy. Seriously, you're not letting me save the post? Because why? It doesn't seem correct. It always lets you download the video. What did I do wrong? Okay, I'll try deleting the text. See if you like me now. Maybe it doesn't let me do that when I'm responding to a video. That's annoying. Well, I guess only TikTokers and Instagram are going to get this video because YouTube gets very mad at me if I post videos with a TikTok watermark. Does not like that. If I lost you because of my tone, you meant anyway. Part of I wrote a book was because I was in the dark in my camper where I lived after another military woman, a low-ranking Mexican-American woman, showed up in 3 shallow graves. And I was so horrified and it was so awful. And I thought to myself, like, why does nobody care? And I was like, oh, I really don't think anybody knows. I think we all know a woman who's gone into the military, and we know actually nothing about what the atmosphere is like for that afterward. And I was like, somebody needs to tell it, and somebody needs to get such a big book deal and support from a publisher that they don't have to ask the Pentagon for permission to protest them. And then, yeah, there is an option for saving without a watermark. It didn't let me do it. It was like the download was grayed out, and it was like, you can't download this until you post it. I hadn't seen that before. These buns took me so long because this one is perfect and this one is horrible and has been done 20 times and is still not the same. Okay. And then the other video that we want to make, oh yeah, we don't need to make that one on TikTok. Gonna be about Jim Jones. So I made a video talking about how So I was on another app talking about how cults are not created by accident. This narrative that it's a good organization that started out with a good purpose and then it just accidentally turned bad is not a true stereotype. I don't know of one example of this happening. And the way I explain it is no one just like trips and accidentally falls into coercive control and just gets it perfectly and happens to have this entire following just nicely set up for brainwashing. That doesn't happen. Organizations that start off with good intent can become more toxic. They can also be taken over by a cult leader type, but it doesn't just start out good, right? Like this is a narrative that the cult joiners, who are the majority of cult scholars, need to cling to, right? People that spent 50 years in the pedo cult need to cling to the idea that it started off good, that it was about love, faith, and Jesus, and then it just went poorly. And that's not true. It was about an alcoholic pedophile who liked to play power games with people, building a following. That's what it always about from the beginning. And so when we cling to this narrative that it just went bad, right? We miss what's actually happening, how manipulative these leaders are. And the fact that the number one way to not have a cult is don't be a cult leader. And so someone decided to take me up on this, and it's really funny when people call out experts with no expertise of their own, because this person was like, well, what about Jim Jones? I don't think he started out bad. And like, I can't even replicate the hysterical, cackling witch laughter that came from me, because Jim Jones is literally the primary example of this. When Jim Jones was 5 years old, he was preaching. He was learning how to manipulate people, not just with his words, but with the tone and the timbre of his voice. He was developing his charisma in all of these different ways. When he was 15 years old, he was threatening to shoot his best friend for not doing exactly what he said when he did it. Jim Jones spent his entire life studying cult leaders and manipulators and trying to build something, anything with a following. The reason that Jim Jones was a big civil rights leader in the 50s, yes, he was because he knew that would set him apart. All cult leaders get into either some kind of political or social justice warriorship almost, because that is what helps you draw people. Or sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's just about transforming yourself. But there's always this bigger, greater goal. That man adopted Black children just to meet his goal. Jim Jones is the ultimate example of something that was never good. And it's very, very significant, not only to Jim Jones, but to every other cult leader, that Jim Jones did not drink the Kool-Aid. Okay? Did not. Died from a bullet to the head. The cult leader knows it's a con, always, from the beginning. This is part of why I think all cults promise space travel. Space travel is my fun term for something you are promised in another life, on another level, in another body, in another state, in another spirit. Because the cult leader cannot let anyone achieve enlightenment. You simply can't, because it's not real. It's made up. And no matter how much they buy into their own narrative later, they know they made it up in the beginning. They know they weren't God's anointed. They know that the enlightenment isn't real. Space travel. Jim Jones is not that's like trying to use Hitler as a good example for something, right? Like, he's the primary guy. Grabbed a photo of my phone of a handout given by a large AA super club in Fort Worth, Texas. Oh, geez. It was Steve McQueen on a motorcycle from the movie The Great Escape. Yeah, in other words, if you leave us, you will die. I started talking about AA yesterday because sometimes I have the energy. And of course, you can just look at my threads and it is just all people telling me how I'm killing people. If even one addict reads this and decides not to go to AA, you're telling me you actually think, I'm going to make a video of this. So yesterday I was talking about AA again, and you can just look at my threads and my notes anywhere you're on, my comments, and you'll see people telling me that I'm actively killing people. Me, a random private person, is sitting in my house knitting in Maryland, talking about the issues of an organization. And people say to me with their full chest, well, if even one addict sees this and decides not to go for help, you have hurt them. So first of all, I don't think it's harmful for addicts not to go to cults for help. But second of all, are you really telling me with your full chest that you want somebody to devote their entire life to an organization, because that is what AA expects, and their entire life to a black and white teetotaling mission, and they shouldn't know everything about the organization? That the bad stuff should be hidden until the organization has them? Because I don't know how to tell you this. That's what cults do. It takes 6 months to onboard fully into either the Children of God or the US Army. And during that time, you have no idea what you signed up for. There's a reason that one of my 10 commandments for good groups that are not cults is information is never bad. Reading bad reviews does not hurt a good organization. I don't know how many times I can tell you that. Hiding bad reviews makes you not a good organization. If you are saying that no critique is possible because it might scare away some addicts, you are a bad organization. And to all of the people that try to tell me that I'm risking lives, my work saves people's lives. Every day, every time I have these AA conversations, somebody comes to me and tells me how this is saving their life because they feel like they are going crazy and nobody will listen to them and nobody will validate what they're saying. So riddle me this. What makes the lives that I'm saving more important than the lives that AA is saving? I'll be right here waiting for an answer. Yeah, there's a reason that in my book, The Culting of America, I use the analogy of as if orderly were standing outside a hospital, blocking inspectors from going inside because they're saving lives. Nothing is above critique. And if you are trying to hide bad stories from members you're trying to get your hooks into, you're a bad organization. That is how I feel. So many comments here that I can't keep up. Oh, I love that quote in this context. Abraham Lincoln, who says if he could have won the war without freeing slaves, he would have. Yeah. They were never good men in the beginning. And I say this with my full effing chest about AA. It was never about helping people get sober. It was always about a cult leader dude who wanted a following, who lied about how he got sober and died very wealthy and with a giant following. It was never about getting people sober. Okay. Now that we've done that, we should probably start reading. You're welcome. I will be here always talking about it. Simply for the fact that I believe all stories of ex-members of a group are relevant, and any group that is trying to tell you not to listen to ex-member stories is trying to con you. There's no valid reason to do it. But everyone that has good experiences can share their good experiences with AA anywhere they want. It is extremely societally accepted. This is true about most Christian churches as well. But if you want to share bad stories, crickets. I actually find it very, very significant, and I don't know why more people don't find this intriguing, that nobody can criticize AA unless it's impossible for them to lose their job. Because I work for myself to find my own job and pay my own money. It's impossible for people to cancel me. Therefore, I can stand here and say all the things about AA with documentation, with research, with thousands of testimonials from former members. And I still get every single threat and every single, literally someone yesterday was like, if I saw someone like this talking on social media, I would fire them right away. And you would be sued, sir. But okay. Yeah. And this is any issue. This is the same thing for deconstructing white supremacy. Can't do it out loud unless you don't have a job that relies on people liking what you say. I guess I should say that is what's true of me. And how is this not just so much more suspicious to everybody? Like, really? Do you know of any organization that only has good reviews? This is actually in the publishing world. This is a sign that only people's friends bought their books. If you see a book that only has 5-star ratings, number one, it wasn't a very popular book. And number two, only that person's friend bought that book and gave it ratings. And so a book with almost all 5-star ratings is considered very unserious in the publishing world. Because I kid you not, There are people who, with their full chests, give Maya Angelou's This Is Why the Caged Bird Sings a 1 star with their full names on Goodreads. You can go see it. It's bonkers. Any organization that only has good reviews or only has ex-members and current members saying good things about it is trying to deceive you. Wish I'd made that a video, but I didn't. All right. Start with this one. Bring my book stand. Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading Worthy, the memoir of an ex-Mormon lesbian. And happy Pride, everybody. Chapter 2, Grammy, Get Your Gun. This is by Chris Davis, who is a creator on TikTok. Grandmothers are magic. Grammys have the time and energy to do the things that moms can't. I have many memories of doing crafts with my Grammy, Sullivan. She showed me how to trace the pattern of a duck on a thin styrofoam sheet and then cut away the excess with a hot wire tool she picked up at a yard sale. She taught me the power of a nickel at those yard sales in her town. She helped me cut out my yes vote from the cereal box and mail it in to tell General Mills that the poor bunny should get his tricks after so many disappointing near misses on the commercials. And she taught me to dress up for shopping trips to the big town of Lincoln, Maine, population 5,000. My Grammy Sullivan, my mother's mother, was a perfect lady on almost all occasions, but she wasn't someone you ever wanted to cross when it came to her family. She defended them fiercely in public and made that loyalty clear to everyone. But in private, she offered plenty of advice and kicks in the pants to her family members who weren't making good life choices. Grammy used to tell me that I was her favorite. I was her first grandchild, and we spent my school vacations together. But I assumed she was saying that to all her grandchildren. After her death during my junior year of high school, my family revealed to me that she had told them all I was her favorite, too. That's when I put the pieces together that every year when she'd ask me what I wanted her to make for me for Christmas, and she'd make all my cousins some version of that same gift. One of those gifts was a crazy quilt that I treasured for decades. She said whenever I wrapped it around me, I was to imagine her giving me a big hug. Grammy Sullivan told me I could be anything I wanted to be, and I believed her. She said that if she'd been born 20 years earlier, she would have been the biggest woman's liber you ever saw. Grammy could hunt, fish, and swear better than any man. About the only thing she couldn't do was write her name in the snow, and if you told her she couldn't, she'd go right outside and prove you wrong. She had an enormous drive to keep her affairs in order and serve her family, and she was compulsive about cleaning and organizing her house. Everything had a place. For holidays and special occasions, we gathered at her house. She baked cakes and pies, making sure to include everyone's favorite treats. I especially loved her rhubarb sauce, but as many times as I tried to like her minced meat pie, I just couldn't develop a fondness for it. She also had a reputation in the community for baking and decorating themed cakes. For my mother's graduation from nursing school, Grammy made a cake in the shape of a hospital bed with a small plastic doll nurse sitting by the bedside. I have home movies of her guiding my brother's eager little finger into the frosting of a panda-shaped cake and letting him taste the sweetness of her love and affection. Grammy had a practice of storing away the really nice things in her home to be used at some future time. This seemed like a reasonable habit for someone who grew up in the Great Depression and was used to making do with simple accommodations. It was a shock and an utter heartbreak for her when the home in which she raised her family burned to the ground. She lost everything. As she hid her vinegar-soaked pots and pans from the insurance adjuster, she imparted her wisdom to 10-year-old me. Never put your best pieces away for a better day. Use them every day and enjoy them throughout your life. When I was taking a home economics class in middle school, Grammy asked me to set the table for supper. I did as my teacher had instructed and only set out the utensils we were planning to use for our meal. She gently corrected me, telling me that when she grew up, her family was poor and didn't have enough flatware for everyone, and they'd all share a mason jar of water in the middle of the table. Because of her deprivation, she put everything out at every meal, a kind of daily celebration of abundance. Another thing my Grammy continues to do for me is remind me of my power. She appears frequently in my mind and heart when I think I can't face a difficult situation. Her influence, though she died when I was in high school, lives and thrives within me. I keep her alive by remembering her words and deeds, recalling how much she loved me and believed in me. She would have protected me fiercely had she known the secret I was living with at home. Grammy would never have approved. Worthy, Family Prayer by Chris Davis. 4 of us gather in my preteen bedroom. We kneel to thank God. Thank God for the plush carpet under my knees. Thank God for the Garfield poster over my bed. Thank God for Grammy's crazy patchwork quilt and its colorful patchwork. Amen. Oops, nope, missed the whole page. Thank God for the princess lamp on my nightstand that casts the dim lighting. Thank God for a loving family who prays together. Dear God, let this prayer never end. Amen. I pull Grammy's quilt squares up and tuck them under my armpits, nice and tight, like a shield. Brother hugs me goodnight and leaves for his own bedroom. Mother hugs me goodnight and wishes me sweet dreams on her way out the door. Stepfather lingers, shadows crawl out from their hiding places. Garfield witnesses actions which are confusing. I do not like this attention, but I assume I'm supposed to try to enjoy the assault. Dear God, is this what stepfathers do? I am the human sacrifice on the altar of my squeaky bed frame. He turns off my lamp and dims the brightness of my childhood. He leaves footprints in the thick pile of my carpet as he exits the scene. I struggle to fall asleep with the smell of my stepfather's breath on my lips. I adjust my nightgown for warmth. Thank God the prayer is over. I will be a peacemaker and not cause contention in our home. I will keep the peace. I will hold my peace. My peace is forever shattered. Amen. 4 of us gather for family prayer again the next night. Thank God for a loving family who prays together. Dear God, let this prayer never end. Family prayers like these that were happening in my bedroom were an example of not being able to trust the adults in my life. Perhaps it was Grammy's fierce love and support that gave me the courage to speak up eventually. At a sleepover church youth camp one day, 3 of my friends and I were talking about kissing boys. I knew I had a secret, but I didn't understand that what I was describing to my friends about my stepfather was considered assault. They were shocked and speechless. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. I went to my church youth group leader, Hannah, and described the adult experiences I had had as a child only 2 years earlier. She interrupted me to hold me tight and rocked me to comfort herself. She cried and told me I needed to go to the bishop because he would know what to do. She's a Mormon. My bishop, my spiritual advisor, my priesthood leader, my assigned confidant, told me there was nothing he could do. The bishop couldn't hold my stepfather accountable because my stepfather had been baptized between the time of the abuse and the time of my reporting it to him. In the eyes of the church, your stepfather was forgiven of all his sins and transgressions when he entered the waters of baptism. He is clean and faultless. There is nothing I can do. The bishop explained over steepled fingertips. It is important for you to move on from this and try not to think of it again. There was no discussion about telling my mother, alerting the police, observing the statute of limitations, getting counseling or expressions of love, empathy, or peace. He was cold and patriarchal, unbending and not to be disobeyed. His word was final, and I was escorted out of his carpeted office and into the desolate hallway of the church building. I was alone. I wasn't going to get any help. My stepfather had won. In his world of adults at church, I didn't matter. I felt like a hermit crab without a shell, naked, vulnerable, unprotected, scared. Grammy would never have approved. In fact, she probably would have rummaged around in her closet for her rifle and paid my stepfather a visit with an impromptu performance of Grammy, Get Your Gun, to enforce her cold steel diplomacy. 2 years later, when I was in high school, my mother and stepfather prepared to go to the temple in Washington, D.C., to have their marriage relationship sealed for eternity. This is an essential ordinance in the church for married couples and their children. However, my brother and I were not invited to participate. I tried one last time to alert the church authorities that my stepfather wasn't worthy to enter the temple because of what he had done to me only a few years earlier. I confided in the stake president, the man to whom the bishop reports. I knew my stepfather was required to pass a worthiness interview with him before receiving permission to enter the temple. The stake president was a friend of mine and my early morning seminary teacher, so I felt comfortable confiding in him and was sure that he would hear me and take action. I wanted my stepfather to be held accountable and answer for his sins before being found worthy. The stake president expressed sympathy and assured me that the matter would be addressed. This gesture brought me some hope and a measure of peace, like an overturned turtle that has been turned upright. A few weeks later, while I was practicing the piano, my stepfather walked into our living room and mumbled an apology. "You know what happened before?" he said to the back of my head. "Well, I'm sorry." And then he kept walking through to the exit at the other side of the room. That was it. That was his accountability. Not only was he given the sacred privilege of a temple recommendation, but he was also asked to fill a leadership position in the congregation. It was as if he'd come out of this stronger and more powerful than before. I was at a loss. This was the moment I started feeling that victims were silenced in the church and that perpetrators were protected and even rewarded. This was a patriarchal party to which I was not invited. Another year went by, and I finally got up the courage to tell my mother about the abuse. I felt creepy around my stepfather and was considering opting into foster care. At first, she said I must be mistaken or confused. Then, after a pause, she said, "You do what you feel like you need to, Christy, but he is my husband. The day will come when you will grow up and move away, and then he'll be the only thing I have left. I'm standing by my husband." This was the moment I started hating her. She made it clear that she would never be my ally, much less my advocate. Once again, I was alone in this world. No one would rescue me. No one would be held accountable. There would be no resolution to my pain and suffering. It's interesting to note that they were divorced before a decade had passed. He stopped going to church, which was a deal breaker for my mother. They grew apart and separated when I was in my college years. I chose not to have contact with him, and my children know very little about him. Thank God that prayer is over. As Grammy Sullivan taught me, I only wanted to hold on to things of value. And no, not the children of God, Mormons. Purity culture is pedophile culture. It doesn't just encourage the pedophiles, it creates the pedophiles. I will die on this hill. It sounds like the children of God. I spent a very long time wondering why I, growing up in the pedophile cult, had so much in common with ex-Mormons. And it's because Mormons are also a pedophile cult. And because the children of God was an evangelical man who took conservative evangelicalism, poured a bunch of Mormon syrup on top of it, and then flipped the control of sex and just made the pedophilia out loud. Yeah, bishops making you apologize to the abuser is another big one. Fucking hate religious men. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but I do. I feel like we're not reading the introduction in one sitting, Angela. Oops. Today for Devotions with Daniella and for Pride Month, we are reading Queering the American Dream by my friend, Dr. Reverend Angela Yarber. Introduction. I have to go get my glasses because this one does not have large text. I'll be back. And of course they're purple. Yesterday was like, how many glasses do you have? Like, well, clearly not enough because I still have outfits for which I don't have matchy glasses. Raised Mormon here and abused by my dad. I told my mom, she supported her husband and joined in. Yeah. And there's this thing where even when religions literally all right, well, TikTok just suspended my access to go live for a week. Well, in case you were just watching my live on TikTok that ended very suddenly, TikTok suspended my access to go live for a week because I was ranting about religions that abuse children. Yeah. Cheerio. Can't go live for a week, exclamation point. Yeah, punishing me for being mad at pedophiles is the right choice. Technically, you can't serve in the military at all with a felony conviction, comma, but they often suspend that when they need extra enlisted soldiers. Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from Queering the American Dream by Dr. Reverend Angela Yarber. Introduction. I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to do. Georgia O'Keeffe. Everything smells like a rainy backpacking trip. Before our child was born, my wife, Elizabeth, and I did a fair amount of backpacking, and we took Rue camping in the middle of the redwoods before he was even 10 months old. It's a smell we're accustomed to, but it's not exactly how I envisioned starting this adventure. With an enormous green canoe strapped precariously to the top of a 2000 Ford Explorer, we've been towing our new home, a pop-up camper named Freya, from North Carolina in the direction of Vermont for 3 days of solid rain. Intent on communing with one of my patron saints of painting, Georgia O'Keeffe, we've pulled into a rather swank campground in Lake George, the place where O'Keeffe summered and painted for many years. We'll camp here for 2 nights before heading to our summer gig in Vermont. A retired woman in a star-spangled blouse meets us at the gate. Do you mean to tell me that you girls are traveling for a year in a pop-up camper with a toddler? Have you lost your minds? Where are your husbands? She asks incredulously, her accent laced with Long Island. And when Angela does book reading, she does the accent. It's so phenomenal. With absurd smiles stretched across our road-weary faces and rain soaking our hair, we respond with the enthusiasm of new travelers. That's the plan. After rattling off the list of things you can't do in the fancy campground, she arches her eyebrows skeptically at our rig as we back into our site. It takes 3 tries. As the rain pummels the canvas, Elizabeth begins the hour-long process of popping up the camper while Rue and I take it off to explore the campground. He splashes wildly through puddles, sometimes babbling one of his 8 words, while I take a note of our neighbors and their expensive RVs, complete with wooden porches, yard decor, hanging baskets overflowing with summer flowers, and a lot of American flags. Not really our scene, but we're excited that, after a year of planning, the adventure is officially beginning. As the rain pummels the canvas, Elizabeth begins the hour-long process of popping up the camper while Rue and I take off to explore the campground. He splashes wildly through puddles, sometimes... Just read that whole paragraph. So we unhitch the camper, and as I pull the Explorer out of the way, the check engine light comes on. This is not the best way to begin a year on the road, especially since we just had the car fully serviced 1 week prior. I call and make an appointment at a local shop for the next morning. We'll have to unstrap the canoe in order to take the car to the shop, I inform Elizabeth. That effing canoe. This would become Elizabeth's refrain for at least the next 3 months. Apparently, she doesn't enjoy paddling quite as much as I do. We put the check engine light out of our minds and turn to something more urgent: sleep. This is technically our first night in the camper, and we haven't quite figured out where our 20-month-old child is going to sleep. We'll sleep in a king-size bed on one end of the 140 square foot pop-up. There's a queen-size bed on the other end that we've already dubbed Rue's romp-around space. It seems logical for him to snooze there, but we are worried that, since he'd always slept in a crib, he might tumble out in the night. After ridiculous attempts at perching the pack-and-play on top of the mattress, we decide to barricade the sides of the bed with luggage to prevent a midnight fall. We settle Rue into his romp-around room, and he sleeps fitfully. We cozy up in our damp bed and listen to the rain batter the canvas of the camper. It's stinky and soggy, and mud coats much of the camper floor. There's a 13-foot green canoe that needs to be taken off the Explorer by 8 a.m., And I'll have to run the 5 miles back from the mechanics because they don't offer a shuttle service. And yet those ridiculous grins remain plastered across our faces as we doze off in our dank little camper, dreaming of adventure that awaits us. If someone had described this scene at Lake George, pouring rain, wet pop-up camper, fussy toddler, broken car, heavy canoe, an abundance of American flags, I don't think I would have traded our comfortable bed in the historic Craftsman nestled within perfect walking distance of downtown that we called home for 3 years. But I did, and I would again. No questions about it. It didn't begin with Lake George. Actually, it's difficult to determine what exactly prompted the seemingly wild decision to quit our jobs, sell our home, and travel for 18 months with our toddler in a camper. Throughout our nearly decade-long relationship, Elizabeth and I had always talked about living differently, whatever the hell that means. These initial conversations took place in Berkeley while we were working on our PhDs. With the world at our fingertips, time on our hands, privilege seeping through our highly educated pores, and little in our bank accounts, I dreamed of a life untethered. But academia and a call to ministry tied me down. Bidding our beloved Bay goodbye, we moved to North Carolina for work with our newly minted doctorates. I was a pastor, Elizabeth a professor. That lasted fewer than 3 years. It wasn't the plan, and I'm big on plans. I write them down, color-coded, with carefully articulated goals, affixed neatly to each stage of the plan, a strict timeline enforced for achievement. I'm a rare author who has never asked for an extension on a deadline, because that's not part of the plan. We made North Carolina home, bought a house, started an adoption process. I thought I'd served that church for 10 years, but it became toxic. Church often has that effect on women and queers. And I'm both of those things. The file folder of hate mail grew thicker, and the sexist and heterosexist microaggressions raged within my own congregation. It was ultimately the microaggressions that did me in. Spiritually spent, I went on a retreat for artists and activists, and I began to heal. In healing, I discerned the time had come for me to follow Lilith's footsteps, climbing the garden's walls to find liberation and work outside the confines of church and academy. And yeah, we'll read about Lilith tomorrow. Don't have a bookmark for this one. I've been kicked off TikTok live for a week because I was ranting about people abusing children. That is not acceptable. How dare. So anyways, I'll probably be live on Instagram a lot this week. Instagram makes everything harder for me. That's why I prefer TikTok. But also TikTok is a horrible little cult with its own craziness. Which just isn't that fun. Okay, now we're going to record a little bit of Uncultured. I think this whole chapter, because this is the shortest chapter in the book. Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from Daniella's book, Uncultured, about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and then going into the cult of the U.S. Army. This is chapter 9, All in the Family. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, 1996. Mary and I were in the schoolroom with the other kids when Mom appeared at the door. My body immediately tensed. My instinct for the unexpected was always fear. Granted permission, we followed her out. I tried to read her mood, tried to understand the emotion she was hiding behind her practiced, serene face. But her posture betrayed her. She almost bounced down the hallway, and it struck me, as it sometimes did, how young she was, how she was really only a few years removed from being a teenager. If I'm 6, she's 21. Once she shut the door to her room, a huge grin burst across her face as she exclaimed, "Your grandpa is coming to live with us." I was completely confused. Grandpa had been dead for nearly 2 years. Had he been resurrected? Grandpa's our prophet. Then Mom started talking about how great it would be to have her dad in the same house as us, like a real family. Even in the privacy of her bedroom, she dropped her volume as she said it. We could never be too careful. There was always someone around a corner who could question our commitment to the family. It carried weight within the family that Mary and I were third generation, with a grandfather who was important to the leadership. But it also meant we didn't know him. He was too Selah, our word for top secret. My understanding of grandparents was that they gave lots of presents, and sometimes family kids got to travel to America and vacation with them in places called hotels. I'd only seen hotels when we witnessed in their lobbies and patio restaurants, performing our song and dance and telling them about Jesus before requesting cash in support. But the family kids with grandparents would actually sleep in hotels sometimes. They'd return from their trip with toys and clothes they got to keep in case the same relatives visited in the future. I had to work hard to hide my envy. Grandpa being in the leadership gave me status and inspired some awe in my classmates. But mostly, I wanted regular grandparents who wanted to buy me things and take me on vacations far away. "Will he bring us presents?" I asked, but Mom didn't know. She explained instead that he would bring our Aunt Charity, who was 9, right between Mary and me. Oh yeah, I'm not 6, I'm 10. Generational overlap was common in the family. "Will he bring us presents?" I just read that. Grandpa Tom showed up early one morning with his third wife, Auntie Annie, and little Charity in tow. They were so Selah that I had never even seen photos of them. So I was amazed that the face of a man could look so much like Mom's. Charity looked like Mom too, beautiful in a way I knew I would never be. And I was immediately jealous of her looks and her clout. Charity arrived with an aura of importance, straight from Mama Maria's house. She'd even known Grandpa when he was alive. I expected to hate her, but when she taught us tricks for stealing money and food from the adults, pretending to find it in legitimate places as gifts from God, my jealousy quickly turned to love. She was one of us. Gramps was bubbly and friendly with a wonderful smile and a worldly t-shirt with a cheeky, "I'm not 50, I'm 80 with 35 years of experience" written on the front. And he had brought gifts. Dangly earrings made out of colored crystal in our birthstone colors. Deep blue for Mary and emerald green for me. I'd never seen anything so beautiful in my whole life. The brilliant color reminded me of the jewel in my Queen Esther crown, and the gems I always imagined adorned the box in my mind that housed my secret thoughts. But these jewels sparkled in the sunlight and looked real. My earrings matched the green foliage on the jungle-patterned jumpsuit he brought me, with tigers and butterflies peeking out from the leaves. I wanted to wear it every day, but I controlled myself, knowing it would be taken from me if I was accused of being too cool. For my 10th birthday a few weeks later, Gramps gave me a brand new copy of Wind in the Willows, the classic children's book that I proceeded to read over and over until the cover nearly fell off. Because he was so important and the rules had somewhat changed, nobody would dare suggest that I couldn't keep the book he gave me. Most of the other kids didn't care about reading, so it was a present that I didn't even have to share. I knew better than to get used to it, but with the new protections of the charter and with my grandfather in my life, I began to feel less afraid. Gramps and Auntie Annie had been given the big, special room upstairs, and we started to spend almost all our family time together. I loved how his face looked like a reflection of Mom's, and how he seemed to love us from the first day, like we didn't even have to earn it at all. And he was more important than even Uncle Jerry. That mattered too. I almost started to believe I could be happy, that I could be safe. But the pendulum swung again. The charter's new rules required only 6 adults aged 16 or older to make an official commune. So our compound started shrinking to branch off all over the world. World Services, the guys at the top, decided to downsize our home to 50 people. With the exception of Charity and Uncle Jerry's stepdaughters, Mary, Dear, Dorothea, and their other sisters, the commune in Rio would not include families with small children any longer. Since the invention of the internet, Dad could work remotely, so our family with 5 young children, me, Mary, Timmy, Darius, and Justin, was forced from World Services, the only group we kids had ever known. Gramps was part of the decision to send us away, and I knew he was acting in what he thought were the best interests of the family, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Despite Mom's beauty, her connections, and her exemplary work, the cruel irony was that it was her very devotion to the Prophet's teachings, going for the gold and averaging a baby every 2 years since she was 15, that ended her advanced secretarial career. But like always, Mom was a true believer. She smiled sweetly when she explained the move to us, praising God and our leaders, never showing her sadness. I was devastated and furious at the thought of losing my friends, who I thought of like sisters. But like so many family moves, there wasn't time to process, and I certainly didn't have any say in the matter. Stuck in my throat. Yes.
Oh, are you live right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, never mind.
What do you need?
I think she's double booked next week.
Oh, I just saw that. It might also just not be in Turquoise next week.
She is. I just double checked it.
Okay.
Where
Did I stop?
Well, what do you want to do next week?
As we said goodbye to our friends, we were introduced to 2 of our new older sisters. Dad's youngest daughters from Auntie Hope, 13-year-old twins, Raina and Jamie, who would join us in our new life. All 7 of Auntie Hope's daughters had been bouncing between communes ever since their mom had been excommunicated for her cancer. Sometimes all the sisters were together. Sometimes they were split up. The leadership eventually decided Dad should take over the 2 youngest. Raina was tall and skinny with brown hair and big glasses, while Jamie was much shorter and curvier with platinum blonde hair and bright blue eyes. They looked nothing alike and nothing like their dad, which I would soon learn was because they were the biological children of a different uncle, part of the sexual sharing all the aunties had to do. The girls didn't seem apprehensive or upset, simply eager to settle into their new lives and see what cards the fates would deal this time. It was scary and intimidating. Our genetically mismatched crew with 2 new older sisters and a family who had always been the family first and our family part-time, expected to start over a few hundred miles away together. We may have lived alongside each other, but even when it came to Mom and Dad and Mary and my 3 younger brothers, we didn't really know each other either. How would we function when it was just our unit? We packed up 2 Volkswagens with our new family of 9, our flea bags stuffed with our few possessions, and Uncle Jebediah and Auntie Lydia to help us make the 7-hour drive west and inland to the new commune that would be our home. With my Bible and my photo album at my feet, I clutched my precious Wind in the Willows in my arms, even though I knew I'd be way too motion sick to read on the drive. Gramps waved cheerfully, the way any good leader would, as if we were any other members leaving on their new mission. I tearfully said a silent goodbye to my family within the family. And then a realization hit me. A sudden ray of light breaking through my sorrow and grief. We were going so far away that I would probably never, ever have to deal with Uncle Jerry again. I had no idea what my life would look like, but I had just enough faith to believe the new charter would protect me, no matter what awaited me on the other side of the drive. No horrible uncle would ever touch me again. Just starting to realize that I'm not going to be able to keep making all of my content live because TikTok is intent on punishing me for using bad words, and I'm sure Instagram will be following shortly. And that's a whole huge bummer. Okay, now, damn it, I don't have time to get to cults, to the cult book yet. Always running out of time. Now we're going to record The Secret Practice